Having a conversation this morning with Decorah School Superintendent Tim Cronin. A lot of things going on in the educational world. Number one at the top of most people's minds is the conference alignment issue. Since we've talked to you last, things are a little bit different. The Howard Winneshiek School District has been accepted into the Upper Iowa Conference. The Upper Iowa has garnered invitations to both walk on in New Hampton. The Decorah School District was discussed at Tuesday's Upper Iowa Conference meeting. Specifically from the Decorah District perspective, Tim, what was the Decorah District asking of the Upper Iowa Conference? What type of a response did you receive from that conference?
So we had been in communication with Upper Iowa Conference, and I was specifically with the president, and just kind of letting him know we had a board meeting last Wednesday, the 31st. And at that board meeting, we discussed sending a letter of inquiry to the Upper Iowa Conference. For those people that want to take the time, that our board meeting is recorded, where we kind of discuss the pluses and minuses of different options that are presented to Decorah. We understand we're pretty limited geography and size-wise with where we could go, and that was the discussion. Anyway, the result of that meeting was we were going to send a letter of inquiry, or we did send a letter of inquiry to the Upper Iowa, asking for an opportunity to have a discussion about what Decorah and the Upper Iowa Conference would look like, making sure to state that the Upper Iowa's, our first choice is, of course, the Northeast Iowa Conference, but I think they're not even tea leaves. I think you can read on the wall that the Northeast Iowa Conference is not growing when schools are looking to leave. And then, of course, on Tuesday when they got accepted, now if Howard Winn leaves, then the Northeast Iowa Conference, I guess it would be down to 4. And then with 2 more invitations, obviously the Northeast Iowa Conference doesn't have much of a chance. So we sent a letter stating that not asking to join the league, but just having a discussion, a letter of inquiry. And I was informed yesterday via email that they declined our request to have a meeting regarding our membership in the NEI, or in the Upper Iowa. So, which is their prerogative to do. And so that information with the New Hampton and Alma Key invites coming from the Upper Iowa, then Decorah, we've got a board meeting coming up on a Monday, our regularly scheduled. So this will certainly be an agenda item. We'll revisit, I'm sure, the stuff we talked about last week, but we kind of made it clear that the Upper Iowa, among other things, for travel is going to be our first choice after the NEIC. So I don't imagine that will change.
What is Decorah's next steps now that your inquiry or request to have a discussion with the Upper Iowa Conference has been turned down?
Well, our next step, obviously we'll discuss this Monday night at the board meeting, but we can always send my guess is we'll discuss, okay, the options that we discussed the other day were being independent, which we didn't, couple sports but we didn't like in general. Approach a conference like the WAMAC, but the travel really makes that prohibitive. Especially when you think about, I think about winter sports with bad weather and school the next day and trying to get back from Williamsburg or wherever. But we can have a discussion about the Upper Iowa, and we can always send them a letter and formally request. We haven't formally requested membership. We just have been turned down on our request to have a conversation. So those are the 3 options. I don't want to speak for what the board will come up with, but I can say, if you took the time to watch the discussion from the 31st, it was pretty clear to me that the Upper Iowa was the best choice for Decorah, and that's where that's where the board will vote to formally apply.
So with the possibility of state mediation being a part of this, do you have to formally apply, then get rejected, or did Tuesday's action by the Upper Iowa Conference superintendents, is that enough of a rejection end of things to basically say that, hey, the state can start mediation now?
No, you're right. You have to apply because you can't mediate until you've been denied on something, right? So So we would have to apply to a conference. Uh, and if we apply to a conference, we either get accepted or denied. If we get denied, then our choice is find a different conference or ask the state for mediation on the conference we got denied from. So in this case, if Monday night we pick Upper Iowa, or WAMAC or some other conference in Iowa, and we would apply to them. And if we got rejected, then we would have the opportunity to mediate it. And we mediate the conference that we got rejected from. You don't just mediate and say, oh, we want to be mediated and put us in the Mississippi Valley or whatever. So yeah, mediation only happens after a formal denial of conference entry. And that's based on I don't know if it's code or the athletic bylaws, but every school district in Iowa is guaranteed to be in an athletic conference.
But I guess rephrasing my question, would the action that the UIC superintendents took on Tuesday, is that enough of a rejection letter?
I not ever having been through the mediation, I believe we have to, I don't think that the email that said we're not going to have a discussion would be the formal rejection. We'd have to formally apply to get formally rejected.
Fair enough. Moving forward, of course, we should emphasize all of these discussions are for the 25-26 academic year. Will Decorah be in a conference that year?
Oh yeah, that's we'll be in a conference, and that's a part of our discussion is we'd like to control that process as much as possible. That's why you start with applying places or applying to a conference. And if something doesn't work out, usually school districts are in an existing conference and they're just looking to leave. And that happens a lot. But in our case, there'll be no teams left in the NAIC for 25-26. So it's literally, you're not leaving an existing conference that is going to remain existing. You're leaving a conference that is dissolving and looking for a new one. But yeah, we've got time. We'll officially decide on Monday. Like I said, if I had to guess, I'd say we'll probably decide to formally apply to the Upper Iowa, but that's why you have public discussions with your board out in the open and those kind of things. And we've tried to do that process, kind of front loaded that process with the special board meeting on the 31st and kind of Mr. Riley meeting with coaches to have discussions and a quick unscientific survey that we did with the public as well.
Why do you need to be in a conference?
I think the benefits to the conference are number one, scheduling. And it goes way beyond basketball, volleyball, wrestling, track. It can filter down to junior high, although we do play a lot of the Upper Iowa conferences in junior high, but it builds a relationship for scheduling stuff. I mean, it helps with, any kind of fan or any kind of problems you might have, interaction if it's, usually have conference bylaws and stuff. There's also, I think, probably sometimes gets overlooked. There's a lot of fine art stuff that's like, maybe a conference art show or something. So it's nice to have a group that organizes and just kind of the conference competitions. And I'm not just talking about wrestling competitions or volleyball tournament competitions, things to do to demonstrate for fine arts as well.
And I know all eyes are forward and you're trying to figure out the eventual solution to all of this, but looking back on how all of these discussions have gone in efforts to keep the Northeast Iowa Conference going, do you feel everything that could possibly be done has been done in efforts to keep the longest and oldest conference in the state going to the best of everybody's ability? Do you have any regrets?
That's a very loaded question, and I would say coming into this process in 2022, it's hard for me to say that we would be in any different place than we are now. But there was stuff that happened before that, when Olwine left and when Charles City was initially upset about the conference, that was publicly reported in the paper and whatnot. Yeah, I think can be a lot of second guessing, armchair quarterbacking on this one. So I'm going to respectfully haw around and not answer that question because it's tough for me to say. And a lot of it would seem like, um, second guessing or hindsight being 2020. But to some degree, and believe me, I don't want to see the state's oldest conference. NEIC has a nice little tradition in my family, as my dad prepped in Decorah and has good stories about pitching against Dwayne Josephson from New Hampton and having to have everybody move their cars farther back in the parking lot so they didn't lose any windshields. Because Dwayne was a very good baseball, well, great athlete, but great baseball player. But a lot of those longtime rivalries, uh, you know, you like to have, but um, times change, populations change, and people change, and you're not. It doesn't do any good to have a conference of one. So,
And what type of a timeline are we on to
oh,
eventually get a remedy to all of this?
yeah, we're kind of at the will of other people on that. You know, so the Decorah board will act on Monday. And in light of all these changes, I'm sure we'll say we're going to send a formal letter to whatever conference. We send the letter to that conference. Whatever their time, we can't demand, hey, you need to get back to us in a week. That they have scheduled meetings. And so let's say we send a letter off to a conference and they say, well, the superintendents aren't going to meet until a month. And then it kind of depends on the conference bylaws too. When I was in the Tri-Rivers conference as Central City, the superintendents could act to accept it, but then they had to take it back to individual boards to have a board vote. And I'm not sure what the bylaws are for the all the conferences, but I believe the Upper Iowa, that's just a superintendent level decision. And so what I'm saying is, it might take, like, we could vote on Monday, but we may not know for a good month what the conference thinks. And then, if it's a no, and then we have to meet, and I'm sure we'll have this discussion on Monday too on what our, if then statements, or if we get a yes, then we're good. If we get a no, do we have a plan B? But it'll be a couple months. And like you mentioned, if mediation's involved, then you got to get that scheduled at the state level. And, just because it's an urgency and it's a question for us doesn't mean that it's gonna probably be a couple good months. I'm sure it'll go into May, June, but hopefully not any longer than that.
And when is there a drop dead date to make sure that everything can get scheduled for 25, 26?
I think most ADs would say that they'd like to know who they're scheduling by like October, if not sooner, for the following year. Because you're making schedules, you're lining up officials, which is a challenge as well, and getting things organized that